So hey everybody, I'm back today working on my old Toro CCR Powerlite 3 horsepower snowblower. I don't know, vintage late 90s. And when I was with you the last time, I was repairing the carburetor because the carburetor went bad. This one has a rubber Viton seat and a steel needle, and the seat had swelled up and almost closed off completely, and is apparently attacked by bad gas. So in the process I ended up trying to start it with, not knowing the carburetor was bad, I tried to start it with the electric motor instead of just pulling it, and I managed to break the bracket, the plastic bracket that holds the engine, and then because it pulled out, I broke the gear that engages the flywheel. Now the challenge is that the gear that gear is no longer available. I had to find one on eBay, and I did. The eBay folks, you know, somebody had them original old stock Toro part. The bracket is available. You can order that. So I'm going to repair the motor here and put her back together. And I'll just, at this point, I have the snowblower apart. I've got the lower shroud off. I have the upper shroud off. I drained the fuel. And that gives me good access here to work on this. So now as we work on the motor, that's what I have. The bracket broke there on the end, and I have to replace that bracket by taking it off the front of the motor. Then the gear broke off the end of the shaft, and you can see just the, that's half the gear. And then the retainer you can see on the end of the shaft there. The right thing would have been for me to stop using the motor. I ran it too long, so the lesson learned is that when the motor starts to mess up, because what happened was the bracket broke, the motor started to move, that overloaded that gear, and then the gear split in half. So there's the new gear that needs to be installed, and it's an official Toro part number that was purchased off eBay. And there's the new front housing bracket that was purchased to one. So now to replace it, we need to take that metal shoulder off of there, and it has a clip underneath it that is a retainer clip that holds things onto the shaft. And the thing to know is that that retainer isn't available anymore, that spring clip. If you happen to lose that one, you're going to need to do some hunting to find a substitute. Now, I'm having because that shoulder seems to be stuck, and it's hard to get to the E-ring or to the clip that's underneath. At this point, I'm noting that there is a spring there, and that spring is also no longer available, so take care of it, protect it. We're going to need to pull those two through bolts out so we can separate the motor housing and replace that piece. This whole thing is a one-piece assembly, and you've got that 110 volt plug, and then all the wiring is connected as a unified assembly. When you work on the clip, make sure you use your safety glasses, because those things can fly, and you want to be safe. It took a little work to need to do a little tapping on the end of that washer, I'll call it, to get it knocked down far enough so that you can see where that wire ring sits. And the sharp tools helped me get it started, but then I needed to use, so we use that sharp tool just to kind of pick it out of there, and then use a small screwdriver kind of wedged in the slot and worked all the way around until I got that wire ring out of there like that. Now the next challenge is going to be that it doesn't want to come off all the way because using that screwdriver raised a burr on there, and it's holding that cupped washer from coming all the way off. So I got a single cut file, and I'm just going to work around the shaft just to knock that burr off. I was surprised how much burr I raised up, but it was sharp enough to keep that washer from coming off. And so I'm just going to work around the shaft here, around the outside of it. And I'm not taking off material really other than just that little bit of a burr that's sticking up. Just have to keep working that until it gets smoothed off a little bit. And I think I'm finally going to get it to come off. There it goes. Finally got it down. So there's the piece, and that retains the gear back in place when we put it back together. And there's the spring that needs to go back on again later. And this piece is part of the gear assembly, and we get a new one of those with the new gear. So now we're going to take the through bolts out and open up the front end of that motor so that we can change the bracket. So we'll get that through bolt loosened up. Just two of them, one on each side. We'll get that second one loosened up. See, once you do that, now you can take the cover off. The armature and the rest of the motor stays in the case. All you do is end up taking off the end plate. Just kind of check them and make sure that they look like they match, and they do. And it can only go on one way because it has to line up with the wiring harness. So it lines up with the wiring harness and then where the two through bolts go through. Just tighten those down good and snug. The nuts are prevailing torque, so they shouldn't loosen up. And you're clamping a plastic housing, so you don't want to overdo it. Alright, so we're going to get this put together. So here's the new gear, and the metal washer is in the end of it. And there's even a little rubber washer that came out that's also part of this assembly. It's already there together. So we're going to go put this in. And then there's a spring. I'm going to put the spring back in. This will be the spring. That little
piece of metal here. There, got it to go over. And we got to put that wire ring back on. Come on. A little tricky. Watch your fingers. Push it on in until it goes down into the slot. I'm just going to use the pliers here and get this retainer all the way out so that that lock ring is seated down in the bottom, which I think it now is. So then when the motor turns, the gear should come flying out here and drive the system. And in the meantime, this cap should snap on the end. Yeah, right, come on. Like that. Keep the dirt and crud out of it. Alright, looks good. Now it's time to install it back onto the engine. Alright, so with the motor, we need to feed this switch and receptacle back over the top. There's you need to get the motor fed back down in here. It has two bolts that mount it, and they were a little bit fun to get out. This top one is really tough because there's not a lot of access. You can't get a straight shot on it with a socket. It does have a Phillips crosshead in it, but you can't really get a screwdriver straight in here either without pulling the whole side apart. So slow run here with an end wrench. So both bolts, one underneath, one up on top. That one up on top is really, really tough to get to. But I got it finally with an end wrench. And then this one's going to need to be reinstalled back here. And there's I put this bolt back because I was running it without the motor. But this is where it ties down the cable. And the book cautions you to make sure that you tie it down properly so that you don't, I mean, when you're using it, it's 110 volts, so you don't want anything, the wire to melt or short or anything because it's a safety hazard. Slow that guy down. Okay. This one will go back here, and I need to put a couple of screws in it. Before we do, this motor gets held down with a tie wrap, and they used a pretty big one. It was broken, and so I didn't have to cut the tie wrap, but it goes, there's a little tab across the bottom there that you need to strap it to. And I don't have any that are quite that big, so let's see what I can do here with some smaller ones. I should probably find a bigger one, but and then I don't have them quite long enough. So but it can vibrate, flex, so it needs to get tied down so it can't move. Make sure I go the right way with these. But you can link them together. Come around here. And actually link them together and cut off the end so it's not hanging out. Here's a tab on the motor. It looks like they want this to be around the back of that tab. But given that these are lighter than what came off of there, I'm going to put several on here to make sure that just judging from the size of that, I decided to put 3 of them on here next to each other, and that seems to have gotten it to stop wiggling. I think it's roughly the same cross section as what this one had, so I'm going to call that good, and then we'll reinstall that switch. And that's what it takes to get that motor put back together. That's all for now.